I never thought I would see my parents on their knees. But there they were in my modest apartment, tears streaming down both their faces as they clutched foreclosure papers in their trembling hands. My father, who had always carried himself with such stubborn pride, was literally begging me to save their house. My mother sobbed uncontrollably about losing everything they had worked for their entire lives. They finally admitted they were wrong about me, completely wrong about my brother Tyler, and desperately needed my help. What they did not know was that I had been 3 steps ahead of this disaster for months, quietly orchestrating my own solution while they remained completely unaware. 5 years earlier, I was sitting in our family dining room with carefully prepared documents spread across the mahogany table my grandmother had left us. At 22, I was 3 months away from graduating with my engineering degree from State University, maintaining a 3.8 grade point average while working multiple jobs to support myself. Every weekend, I served tables at wedding receptions and corporate events, earning enough to cover my meal plan and textbooks. During the week, I shelved books at the campus library and tutored struggling calculus students for $15 an hour. Despite all my efforts, I faced an $8,000 shortfall for my final semester tuition. The financial aid office had been clear that without this payment, I could not register for my last 12 credit hours needed to graduate. Everything I had worked for hung in the balance. I had spent weeks researching this conversation. My folder contained printed interest rate comparisons, detailed repayment schedules, and documentation of my post-graduation job offer from Henderson Engineering, starting at $65,000 annually. I understood that asking my parents to co-sign a student loan represented a significant request, but the numbers clearly demonstrated my ability to handle the responsibility. My father, Harold, sat across from me, his reading glasses perched on his nose as he barely glanced at my carefully prepared materials. His salt and pepper beard was neatly trimmed, and he wore his usual weekend uniform of khaki pants and a polo shirt. My mother, Patricia, sat beside him, her auburn hair perfectly styled, despite this being a casual Saturday morning meeting. She folded her hands on the table and waited for Harold to lead the discussion, as she always did. "College debt is dangerous, Arlene," Harold said immediately after I finished my presentation. His voice carried the same tone he used when discussing risky investments or poor financial decisions he had witnessed among his coworkers. "We will not enable poor financial decisions that could follow you for decades." Patricia nodded in agreement, adding her own concerns about graduates she had heard about who were drowning in student loan payments. "The stories on the news are terrifying," she said. "Young people spending their entire 20s paying off education that might not even guarantee them good jobs." I calmly reopened my folder and pointed to the job offer letter. "This position is already secured," I explained. "Henderson Engineering has confirmed my starting salary, and my calculations show that I can pay off this loan within 3 years, while still maintaining a comfortable standard of living." Harold shook his head firmly. "Numbers on paper are one thing, Arlene. Real life is another. What if the economy changes? What if the engineering field becomes oversaturated? We have seen too many people make these same assumptions only to find themselves in financial trouble later." I tried a different approach, showing them the interest rates for federal student loans compared to private alternatives. "If I have to pursue private lending, the rates will be significantly higher. Your co-signing would save thousands of dollars in the long run." "The answer is no," Harold said with finality. "We love you, but we will not contribute to a decision we believe is fundamentally unsound." Just as I was gathering my rejected documents, the front door burst open with Tyler's characteristic enthusiasm. My younger brother bounded into the dining room carrying a set of BMW keys, his face flushed with excitement and his sandy hair disheveled from the wind. "You will not believe what just happened," Tyler announced, completely oblivious to the serious conversation he had interrupted. "The dealership approved everything. I am now the proud owner of a brand new BMW 3 Series sedan. $72,000 of pure German engineering." My parents' faces immediately transformed. The stern disapproval they had shown me melted into warm smiles as they listened to Tyler describe his new luxury vehicle. Harold actually stood up to shake Tyler's hand in congratulation. "That is wonderful news," Patricia said, her voice filled with genuine pride. "We are so proud of you for securing such a reliable vehicle for your career." I sat frozen in my chair, still holding my rejected loan documents. "Wait," I said slowly. "Are you saying you co-signed for Tyler's car?" "Of course we did," Harold replied matter-of-factly. Tyler needed dependable transportation for his sales position. A professional appearance is crucial in his field. Tyler grinned and jangled his new keys. They signed the paperwork this morning before you even got here, Arlene. Unlike your fancy degree obsession. This is an investment that actually makes sense. Patricia chimed in with her own justification. Besides, automobiles hold their value much better than education. If Tyler ever needs to, he can always sell the car and recover most of his investment. I stared at my parents in complete disbelief. They had just refused to co-sign an $8,000 educational loan while simultaneously approving a $72,000 luxury car loan on the same day. The math was so ridiculous that I initially thought Tyler was joking. Let me understand this correctly, I said, my voice carefully controlled. You believe that co-signing a small educational loan for your daughter who has proven academic excellence and a secured job offer is too risky, but co-signing a luxury car loan 9 times larger for your son who has changed jobs 3 times in 2 years is sound financial planning. Harold's expression hardened at my tone. Tyler's situation is completely different. He needs this vehicle to succeed in sales. His income depends on making professional impressions with clients. A reliable car is essential for Tyler's career advancement, Patricia added. Education is a gamble. Transportation is a necessity. Tyler smirked at me from across the table. Some people understand practical investments, and others get caught up in theoretical academic pursuits. I quietly gathered my documents and stood up from the table. The weight of their decision settled over me like a physical blow, but I refused to let them see how deeply they had wounded me. In that moment, I made a silent vow that I would never forget this conversation, or the crystal-clear demonstration of where I stood in their priorities. Over the following weeks, I scrambled to secure private student loans at significantly higher interest rates. My roommate Sarah watched me work late into the night, filling out application after application for funding that would cost me thousands more than the original federal loan would have. Your parents are making a huge mistake, Sarah told me one evening as I calculated repayment scenarios on my laptop. Tyler is going to crash and burn, and they are going to realize they backed the wrong child. I looked up from my computer screen and gave her a small smile. Maybe, but by then, I will have already proven my worth through my own success. 3 months later, I walked across the stage at graduation with highest honors, wearing my cap and gown with a feeling of triumph that my family's lack of support could not diminish. Henderson Engineering had confirmed my starting position, and I was preparing to begin my career with confidence despite the financial obstacles I had overcome. Tyler, meanwhile, had begun showing signs of the instability that would eventually destroy everything. His BMW gleamed in our parents' driveway during family gatherings, a constant reminder of their willingness to support his lifestyle while questioning mine. He would arrive at Sunday dinners wearing expensive clothing and talking about his latest business ventures with the kind of enthusiasm that impressed our parents, but struck me as increasingly unrealistic. His employment history became a pattern of brief stints at different companies. First, he left his original sales position because the commission structure was not aggressive enough. Then he jumped to a startup technology company that promised rapid advancement, but folded within 6 months. Next came a brief period selling insurance, followed by an attempt to break into real estate during a particularly challenging market period. Each career change was accompanied by elaborate explanations about industry problems, difficult managers, or economic factors beyond his control. Our parents accepted every excuse and continued to view his frequent job changes as evidence of his ambitious nature, rather than his inability to maintain steady employment. During this same period, Tyler's lifestyle expenses continued to escalate. He moved into an upscale apartment complex with amenities like a fitness center and swimming pool. His wardrobe consisted entirely of designer brands, and his social media accounts showcased expensive restaurant meals and weekend trips to resort destinations. When I asked how he afforded these luxuries between jobs, he would give vague answers about smart investing and cryptocurrency trading. Our parents not only supported these choices but actively encouraged them. Harold would praise Tyler's networking efforts and business acumen during family gatherings. Patricia would admire his fashion sense and social connections, often commenting that Tyler understood how to present himself professionally in ways that would lead to success. Meanwhile, my own career progressed steadily, but received minimal acknowledgement. I had received positive performance reviews, completed my first major project ahead of schedule, and earned a small but meaningful promotion within my first year. When I shared these accomplishments during family dinners, the conversation would quickly shift back to Tyler's latest entrepreneurial ideas or social achievements. The disparity became even more apparent when Tyler began borrowing money from our parents for various investment opportunities. First, he needed $5,000 to buy into a cryptocurrency trading program that promised extraordinary returns. Then he required another $3,000 to purchase inventory for a multi-level marketing business selling nutritional supplements. Each request was accompanied by detailed presentations about profit potential and business growth projections that our parents found convincing. Harold would often mention these loans during conversations with me, framing them as smart investments in Tyler's entrepreneurial development. "Your brother has such vision," he would say. "He sees opportunities that most people miss completely." Patricia would add her own admiration for Tyler's ambition. "Tyler is not afraid to take calculated risks. That kind of boldness is what separates successful people from those who settle for ordinary careers." Their words stung because they implied that my steady engineering position represented settling for mediocrity, while Tyler's constant scheme jumping demonstrated superior ambition. I began to realize that nothing I achieved through traditional hard work would ever impress them as much as Tyler's flashy lifestyle and grand promises. The breaking point came on a rainy November evening when Tyler's true character finally revealed itself in a way that should have opened our parents' eyes forever. He had been drinking at an upscale downtown bar, celebrating what he claimed was a major business deal that would set him up financially for years to come. Instead of calling a rideshare service or asking someone sober to drive him home, Tyler decided to drive his beloved BMW while significantly intoxicated. The accident happened on a residential street just 3 miles from the bar. Tyler lost control while taking a curve too quickly and slammed into a parked delivery truck. The impact completely destroyed the front end of his BMW and deployed both airbags, leaving Tyler with cuts on his face and bruises across his chest from the seatbelt. By some miracle, no one else was injured. The delivery truck sustained damage, but its driver had been inside a nearby building making a delivery when the crash occurred. Tyler's injuries, while painful and frightening, were not life-threatening, but the police report told a story that should have shattered our parents' faith in their golden child forever. Tyler's blood alcohol content measured 0.14, nearly twice the legal limit. The responding officer noted that Tyler had been argumentative and uncooperative during field sobriety testing. Witnesses from the bar reported that Tyler had been drinking heavily and had been asked to calm down earlier in the evening due to his loud and aggressive behavior. When I received the call about the accident, I rushed to the hospital expecting to find our parents devastated by Tyler's irresponsible behavior and the realization of how badly the situation could have ended. Instead, I found them in full protective mode, making excuses and focusing entirely on Tyler's physical recovery. "Thank goodness he was not hurt worse," Patricia said, stroking Tyler's hair as he lay in the hospital bed with butterfly bandages across his forehead. "Cars can be replaced, but Tyler cannot." Harold was already on his phone with insurance companies and towing services, handling the practical aspects of the situation with the same efficiency he would apply to any other problem. "The important thing is that Tyler learned from this experience," he said. "Everyone makes mistakes." Tyler himself showed no genuine remorse. Instead, he focused on spinning the story in his favor, claiming that the delivery truck was parked illegally and that the wet road conditions were primarily responsible for the accident. He mentioned his drinking only in passing, describing it as having just a couple of drinks to celebrate his business success. I waited for our parents to confront Tyler about his drinking and driving, to express anger about the danger he had created, or to impose some kind of consequences for his reckless behavior. Instead, they treated the entire incident as an unfortunate accident that could have happened to anyone. The insurance company's investigation revealed the truth that Tyler was trying to hide. They refused to cover the accident due to his intoxication, leaving him with a totaled BMW and no insurance settlement to replace it. The delivery truck's damage would also become Tyler's financial responsibility, adding thousands more to the cost of his poor decision. I assumed this would finally force our parents to recognize the pattern of irresponsibility they had been enabling and supporting. I thought they would refuse to help Tyler replace his luxury vehicle and instead encourage him to purchase something modest and practical that he could afford on his own. Instead, Harold announced that he had already contacted the BMW dealership about replacement options. Tyler cannot function in sales without reliable transportation, he explained. This setback cannot be allowed to derail his career prospects. Patricia supported Harold's decision completely. Tyler has learned his lesson from this experience. Everyone deserves a second chance to prove themselves. Within a week, our parents had co-signed another $70,000 loan for Tyler to purchase an even newer BMW sedan. When I asked about their previous concerns regarding dangerous debt, Harold dismissed my questions with irritation. Tyler's situation is completely different from your student loan request, he said. He has immediate transportation needs that directly impact his earning potential. Tyler's manipulation of the situation was masterful. He presented himself as a reformed person who had learned valuable lessons about responsibility and moderation. He promised to limit his drinking and to always use rideshare services when going out socially. He spoke about the accident as a wake-up call that had given him new perspective on what really mattered in life. Our parents accepted every word of his performance without question. They signed the new loan paperwork with the same enthusiasm they had shown for his original car purchase, treating Tyler's recovery from his accident as evidence of his resilience rather than a red flag about his judgment and character. As I watched Tyler drive away in his replacement BMW, I realized that our parents would continue enabling his behavior, regardless of how much evidence accumulated about his irresponsibility. Their investment in seeing Tyler as successful had become too large for them to acknowledge their mistakes. I also realized that I needed to prepare myself for the inevitable consequences of their choices. Tyler's pattern of poor decisions was escalating, and our parents' willingness to bail him out was only encouraging more reckless behavior. Eventually, their enabling would lead to a crisis that even their blind faith could not solve. 2 years after Tyler's accident, I had established myself firmly in my engineering career, with a promotion to senior project manager and a salary increase that placed me comfortably in the middle class. I had moved into a spacious one-bedroom apartment in a safe neighborhood and begun dating Marcus, a fellow engineer whose steady personality and shared values made our relationship feel like the foundation for a genuine future together. Tyler, meanwhile, had begun living a lifestyle that seemed impossible to sustain on any legitimate income. His apartment had upgraded to a luxury complex with a concierge service and rooftop terrace. His wardrobe consisted entirely of designer suits that cost more than most people's monthly rent. His social media accounts showcased constant dining experiences at the city's most expensive restaurants and weekend getaways to exclusive resort destinations. During family gatherings, Tyler would arrive wearing watches that cost more than my car and carrying the latest technology gadgets still in their original packaging. He spoke confidently about his various business ventures, using industry jargon and buzzwords that impressed our parents, but struck me as increasingly hollow and rehearsed. Our parents not only failed to question Tyler's lifestyle but actively celebrated it as evidence of his business acumen and networking abilities. Harold would show Tyler's social media posts to his coworkers, bragging about his son's success and connections. Patricia would ask for Tyler's advice about investments and business opportunities, treating him as a financial expert despite his lack of formal education or proven track record. The reality behind Tyler's facade began to reveal itself through small details that our parents either ignored or rationalized away. During one family dinner, Tyler received multiple urgent phone calls that he took outside, speaking in hushed tones with obvious agitation. When I asked about the calls, he claimed they were from clients discussing time-sensitive business deals, but his body language suggested they were more likely creditors or collection agents. Harold confided in me during a private conversation that he and Patricia had been providing Tyler with what he called small loans to help with cash flow between business deals. When I asked for specific numbers, Harold admitted that these temporary loans had totaled over $15,000 in the past year alone. Tyler always pays us back, Harold assured me. Sometimes his business payments are delayed, but he is good for the money. I asked whether Tyler had actually repaid any of these loans, and Harold's uncomfortable silence provided the answer. The $15,000 represented gifts, not loans, regardless of how our parents preferred to categorize them. Patricia's concerns began to surface during holiday gatherings, though she expressed them carefully to avoid criticizing Tyler directly. She would mention that Tyler seemed stressed and tired, and that his eating habits had become irregular. She worried about his social life, noting that he seemed to be constantly networking for business rather than maintaining genuine friendships. I offered to help our parents create a budget system that would give them better visibility into their financial commitments and help them set boundaries around Tyler's requests for assistance. They politely declined, suggesting that their finances were under control and that Tyler's situation was temporary. Tyler had also begun bringing around a new girlfriend named Amber, whose presence added another expensive dimension to his lifestyle. Amber was obsessed with social media influence and maintaining an image of luxury that required constant purchases of clothing, jewelry, and experiences designed to generate online attention. She spoke about Tyler's business success as though she had insider knowledge, but her descriptions of his work were even vaguer than his own explanations. The engagement party that our parents funded for Tyler and Amber cost more than my entire annual rent. They rented a private dining room at an exclusive country club, hired professional photographers, and provided premium bar service for over 100 guests. Harold and Patricia dipped into their retirement savings to cover the costs, justifying the expense as an investment in Tyler's professional network and future business opportunities. During the party planning, I offered to contribute to the costs or help with organization, but our parents dismissed my offers as unnecessary. Tyler's celebration needed to reflect his success and status, they explained, and my modest contribution would not significantly impact the overall quality of the event. The real alarm bells began ringing when I accidentally discovered disturbing documents while visiting our parents' home for a routine family dinner. I had gone to their home office to use the printer for some work documents when I noticed credit reports and loan statements scattered across Harold's desk. The paperwork revealed financial obligations that I did not recognize from our family's previous discussions. There were multiple personal loans, payday loan agreements, and credit card statements showing balances that seemed inconsistent with our parents' income and normal expenses. Most disturbing were several loan applications that appeared to bear our parents' signatures but were dated during periods when I was certain they had been out of town visiting relatives. My investigation revealed a sophisticated fraud scheme that Tyler had been operating for months. He had been forging our parents' signatures on loan applications, using their personal information and credit history to secure funding for his lifestyle and business ventures. The documents showed that Tyler had successfully obtained over $40,000 through these fraudulent means. Tyler had clearly developed his forgery skills over time, practicing our parents' signatures until he could reproduce them convincingly on financial documents. He had enough access to their personal information through family relationships to complete applications accurately, and his knowledge of their schedules allowed him to time his applications when they would be unavailable to receive verification calls from lenders. I faced an agonizing moral dilemma. Exposing Tyler's fraud would devastate our parents both financially and emotionally, destroying their faith in their son and forcing them to confront the reality of how completely he had manipulated them. But allowing the fraud to continue would only compound the eventual damage and potentially place our parents in legal jeopardy as unwitting accomplices. I decided to approach Harold indirectly, mentioning general concerns about identity theft and suggesting that he monitor his credit reports for suspicious activity. Harold's response was defensive and dismissive, treating my suggestions as evidence of jealousy toward Tyler's success. "Your brother has never given us reason to doubt his honesty," Harold said firmly. "These conspiracy theories are unbecoming and frankly hurtful to the family." When I tried to raise similar concerns with Patricia, she dismissed them as sisterly rivalry and suggested that I focus on my own life rather than looking for problems with Tyler's achievements. Their unwillingness to even consider the possibility of Tyler's deception made it clear that any direct confrontation would be seen as a malicious attack rather than protective intervention. Tyler became aware of my suspicions through subtle changes in family dynamics and began working more aggressively to isolate me from family financial discussions. He would schedule important family meetings during times when I was unavailable due to work commitments. He would present new business opportunities and investment schemes to our parents during private conversations, then mention these plans casually during group gatherings, as though the decisions had already been finalized. His manipulation tactics became increasingly sophisticated as he realized that my growing distance from the family represented a threat to his schemes. He would praise my engineering career in front of our parents while simultaneously suggesting that my technical focus made me unable to understand complex business relationships and opportunities. The evidence I had discovered forced me to accept that intervention would be ineffective and potentially counterproductive. Our parents had invested too much emotional energy in believing Tyler's success stories to accept evidence of his deception. Warning them would likely result in my own exclusion from the family rather than Tyler's exposure. Instead, I began preparing for the inevitable financial disaster that Tyler's schemes would eventually create. I started documenting the evidence of his fraud and maintaining copies of all the financial documents I had discovered. I researched foreclosure laws and bankruptcy procedures, educating myself about the legal options that our parents might eventually need. My relationship with our parents became increasingly strained as they interpreted my emotional distance as jealousy and negativity. They began excluding me from family celebrations and important discussions, treating Tyler as their primary source of family connection and pride. Their isolation of me was exactly what Tyler had been working toward, giving him complete access to their finances and trust without my interference or questions. As I watched our family dynamics deteriorate, I realized that my only remaining option was to prepare for the crisis that would eventually force our parents to confront the truth about Tyler's character and the consequences of their enabling behavior. 6 months later, the carefully constructed foundation of lies that supported Tyler's lifestyle began to crumble with shocking suddenness. His behavior had become increasingly erratic, marked by secretive phone conversations, nervous energy during family gatherings, and a desperate quality to his interactions with our parents that suggested mounting pressure from sources they could not see. Amber's demands for an extravagant wedding had escalated beyond even Tyler's ability to manage. She had selected a venue that required a $25,000 deposit, ordered a custom dress that cost more than most people's cars, and planned a honeymoon to European destinations that would require another $15,000 in expenses. Her expectations were fed by social media comparisons and a complete disconnect from financial reality that Tyler had encouraged through months of false promises about his business success. Our parents had already liquidated most of their retirement savings to support Tyler's various business ventures and lifestyle expenses. Harold had secretly taken out a second mortgage on their family home without fully explaining the implications to Patricia, presenting it as a temporary measure to take advantage of investment opportunities that Tyler had brought to their attention. The house that had been their pride and security for over 20 years suddenly carried debt that exceeded its market value. Their monthly payments had become unmanageable on Harold's salary alone, but Tyler had convinced them that his business profits would soon cover all their expenses and allow them to pay off the additional mortgage quickly. Meanwhile, my own life had reached a point of genuine stability and happiness. My engineering projects were receiving recognition within the company. I had earned another promotion with a substantial salary increase, and my relationship with Marcus had developed into discussions of engagement and shared future plans. The contrast between my steady progress and Tyler's chaotic lifestyle was becoming more apparent with each family gathering. Tyler's business ventures had evolved into increasingly desperate schemes that required larger upfront investments with promises of massive returns. His latest proposal involved convincing our parents to invest their remaining home equity into cryptocurrency trading software that guaranteed extraordinary profits with minimal risk. He presented complicated charts and testimonials from supposed successful users, creating an illusion of legitimacy that masked an obvious scam. Harold and Patricia seriously considered Tyler's proposal despite having no understanding of cryptocurrency markets or trading software. Tyler's presentation was polished and convincing, filled with technical terminology and profit projections that made his parents feel like they were being offered exclusive access to cutting-edge investment opportunities. I attempted one final intervention, explaining to our parents that Tyler's investment scheme contained all the classic warning signs of financial fraud. I showed them independent research about the company Tyler was promoting, revealing that it had no legitimate business address and no verifiable track record of successful trading. My presentation was factual, thorough, and designed to protect them from a devastating financial decision. Their response was swift and definitive. Harold accused me of jealousy and sabotage, suggesting that my inability to understand advanced business concepts was driving me to undermine Tyler's success. Patricia supported Harold's assessment, treating my intervention as evidence of character flaws rather than genuine concern for their welfare. Tyler has proven his business judgment repeatedly, Harold said with finality. Your constant negativity and suspicion are damaging to this family. They moved forward with Tyler's cryptocurrency investment despite my warnings, liquidating their remaining savings and increasing their home equity debt to fund another of his schemes. Their faith in Tyler had become so complete that evidence of his deception was interpreted as attacks from outsiders who did not understand his vision and capabilities. The collapse began on a Tuesday morning in early March when Amber called Patricia, sobbing hysterically and barely able to speak coherently through her tears. Tyler had vanished completely during the night, leaving behind only a brief note claiming that he needed to handle urgent business matters and would be in touch soon. Amber's investigation of Tyler's disappearance revealed the scope of his deception and the depth of the crisis he had left behind. His luxury apartment was completely empty, with no furniture, personal belongings, or any indication that he had ever lived there. His phone number had been disconnected, his social media accounts had been deleted, and none of his supposed business associates had any knowledge of his whereabouts. The bills that Tyler had been hiding began arriving in overwhelming quantities. Credit card companies, personal loan providers, and vendors from his failed business ventures all demanded immediate payment for debts that totaled well over $100,000. Many of these debts included our parents as co-signers or guarantors, making them legally responsible for Tyler's obligations. The BMW that our parents had co-signed was 3 months behind on payments, with the lender threatening immediate repossession if the account was not brought current within 10 days. The cryptocurrency investment that had consumed their remaining savings had disappeared entirely, with no way to recover the funds or even verify that any actual investment had taken place. Harold discovered that Tyler had continued his forgery schemes, using their personal information to open additional credit accounts and secure payday loans that carried devastating interest rates. The total amount of fraudulent debt exceeded $60,000, but proving Tyler's forgery would require legal proceedings that our parents could not afford and might not win. The foreclosure notice arrived during what should have been a peaceful family dinner preparation. Patricia was setting the table with her grandmother's china when the certified mail delivery interrupted their routine. The legal documents made it clear that their home would be sold at auction unless they could bring their mortgage current and pay substantial legal fees within 30 days. Harold's breakdown was complete and devastating. The man who had always projected strength and financial wisdom was forced to admit that their retirement savings were gone, their home was in jeopardy, and their son had systematically destroyed their financial security through years of deception and fraud. Patricia's reaction was even more heartbreaking as she slowly comprehended the full scope of their situation. The second mortgage that Harold had presented as a temporary measure was now revealed as a desperate gamble that had failed completely. Their monthly income could not cover their current debt obligations, let alone the additional payments needed to prevent foreclosure. Their attempts to contact Tyler through mutual friends and former employers yielded nothing but confirmation that he had vanished as completely as if he had never existed. His business associates turned out to be either fellow con artists or victims of his schemes. His supposed clients and investment partners were fictional creations designed to support his elaborate lies. The humiliation of their situation was compounded by the realization that they had dismissed my warnings and excluded me from family decisions in favor of believing Tyler's deceptions. Harold and Patricia were forced to confront the uncomfortable truth that their favoritism and enabling had created the conditions for their own destruction. As I watched my parents navigate the early stages of their financial crisis, I struggled with conflicting emotions of vindication and genuine concern for their welfare. They had created their own disaster through years of poor judgment and willful blindness. But they were still my parents, and their suffering was difficult to witness regardless of its causes. I began quietly researching their situation and exploring options for potential intervention, though I was careful not to reveal my interest or concern. The foreclosure timeline was aggressive but not impossible to address with the right strategy and sufficient resources. The question was whether our parents would be willing to accept help from the daughter they had repeatedly dismissed in favor of the son who had betrayed them. 3 months into the foreclosure process, our parents' situation had deteriorated beyond what I thought possible for a middle-class family with decades of stable employment. The legal proceedings moved forward with mechanical efficiency, indifferent to the human drama unfolding in our family home. Harold had become a shadow of his former confident self. His meetings with bankruptcy attorneys were humiliating exercises in cataloging the extent of their financial destruction. Every session revealed new debts that Tyler had created using their personal information, each one adding to the mountain of obligations that far exceeded their ability to pay. Patricia's transformation was even more heartbreaking. After 15 years as a homemaker, she was forced to enter the job market during the worst period of their lives, competing against candidates half her age for positions that barely paid above minimum wage. Her lack of recent work experience made every interview an uphill battle that often ended in polite rejection letters. The family home that had been their pride for over 20 years began showing visible signs of neglect as they redirected every available dollar toward debt payments. The lawn care service was canceled, leaving the yard to become overgrown. Interior maintenance was deferred indefinitely, creating an atmosphere of decay that matched their emotional state. Utility companies began sending disconnection notices as Harold and Patricia struggled to prioritize which bills to pay with their limited income. They had negotiated payment plans for some services, but these arrangements only delayed the inevitable cutoffs that would make the house unlivable, even if they somehow managed to prevent foreclosure. Their food budget had been reduced to basic necessities purchased with careful attention to sales and discount offers. Patricia's cooking, which had once been a source of family pride during holiday gatherings, was now limited to simple meals designed to stretch ingredients across multiple days. The social isolation that accompanied their financial crisis was almost as devastating as the monetary losses. Harold's pride prevented him from discussing their situation with coworkers and longtime friends. Patricia stopped participating in community activities and volunteer organizations that had been central to her identity for years. My own observation of their deteriorating situation was necessarily discreet, as they had become defensive and secretive about their financial struggles. During my increasingly rare visits to their home, I noticed small changes that told the story of their desperation more clearly than any conversation could have. The first missing items were subtle enough that I initially attributed them to normal household changes. Patricia's engagement ring was no longer on her finger, replaced by a simple band that I had never seen before. Harold's father's vintage watch, which had been a treasured family heirloom, was absent from his wrist. As the foreclosure deadline approached, the missing items became more obvious and heartbreaking. The antique china set that had been Patricia's pride during family dinners was replaced with everyday dishes from the kitchen cabinets. Silver serving pieces that had been family treasures for generations disappeared without explanation. When I asked about the missing items during a family dinner, Patricia's eyes filled with tears as she admitted that they had been selling precious possessions to make minimum payments on their various debts. Harold's shame was evident as he explained their desperate calculation that selling family heirlooms might buy them a few additional weeks before foreclosure. The engagement ring that Harold had saved for months to purchase 40 years earlier had been sold to a pawn shop for a fraction of its sentimental value. Patricia's mother's jewelry collection, which had been intended to pass to me someday, had been converted to cash through online sales that yielded barely enough to cover 1 month's worth of debt service. Harold's father's watch, a military timepiece that had survived World War II and carried decades of family history, was pawned for enough money to prevent immediate utility disconnection. Each sale represented not just financial loss but the destruction of family memories and connections to previous generations. Their calculations were heartbreakingly optimistic, based on the hope that Tyler might return with explanations and solutions, or that some unexpected source of income might rescue them from their predicament. They sold precious items piece by piece, convincing themselves that each sacrifice might be the one that turned their situation around. Patricia's tears during our conversation revealed the emotional cost of these desperate measures. "Your father's watch meant everything to him," she said quietly. Selling it felt like betraying his memory. But we told ourselves that preventing foreclosure was more important than keeping material possessions. Harold's explanation was even more devastating in its simple honesty. "We have been selling our history one piece at a time, hoping to buy enough time for something to change. But nothing changes except that we have fewer precious things left to sacrifice." Their isolation had become complete as they withdrew from social connections that might reveal their financial struggles. Former friends and community relationships were abandoned, rather than risk the humiliation of having their situation discovered. They lived in a shrinking world defined entirely by debt obligations and survival strategies. The utility disconnection notices had escalated to final warnings as their payment plans failed to keep pace with accumulating charges. Harold had negotiated extensions and partial payment arrangements that provided temporary relief but ultimately made their situation worse by adding fees and penalties to their basic obligations. Their food situation had become genuinely concerning as they stretched increasingly limited budgets across basic nutritional needs. Patricia's careful shopping and meal planning could only accomplish so much when the available funds were barely adequate for survival, let alone nutrition. Harold's health was suffering under the constant stress of their financial crisis. His blood pressure had increased to dangerous levels, but they could not afford medical consultations or prescriptions to address the problem. Patricia was showing signs of depression and anxiety that she tried to hide but could not completely suppress. Their final desperate attempt to avoid foreclosure involved visiting the bank for a loan modification meeting that they approached with the desperation of people who had exhausted all other options. They prepared carefully for the meeting, gathering documentation of their changed circumstances and hoping that their decades of previous reliability might convince the lender to restructure their debt. The bank's rejection was swift and definitive. Their income was simply insufficient to support any realistic payment plan, and Tyler's default history made them unacceptable risks for any form of loan modification. The loan officer's explanation was professional but final. Foreclosure would proceed as scheduled unless the full amount owed was paid immediately. Harold and Patricia returned home from that meeting with the defeated expressions of people who had finally accepted the reality of their situation. They had exhausted every option, sold everything of value, and accepted that their home would be lost, regardless of any further efforts they might make. That evening, they made the phone call they had been avoiding for months. They swallowed their pride and asked if they could visit me to discuss their situation and explore whether I might be willing to help them avoid the complete destruction of everything they had built together. As I agreed to meet with them, I felt a complex mixture of emotions that I was still processing. Their desperation was genuine and heartbreaking, but it had been created entirely through their own choices and their refusal to listen to warnings that might have prevented their disaster. The scene that greeted me when my parents arrived at my apartment was more devastating than I had anticipated. Harold and Patricia looked like they had aged a decade in the few months since our last family gathering. Harold's usually neat appearance was replaced by clothes that hung loosely on his diminished frame. Patricia's once perfect hair was gray at the roots and styled with obvious inattention to her former standards. They entered my living room with the hesitant steps of people who were no longer certain of their welcome anywhere. The confident parents who had dismissed my concerns and rejected my warnings had been replaced by broken individuals whose desperation was evident in every gesture and expression. Harold clutched the foreclosure papers in hands that shook with either fear or humiliation. Patricia carried a tissue that had been used so frequently it was falling apart, evidence of tears that had become a constant part of her daily routine. They sat on my couch with the careful politeness of guests rather than the casual comfort of family members. "We need to talk to you about our situation," Harold began, his voice barely above a whisper. The man who had always spoken with authority and certainty was now struggling to find words for a conversation that required him to admit the complete failure of his judgment and financial management. Patricia's tears began immediately, flowing with the automatic consistency of someone who had been crying for so long that emotional control was no longer possible. "We have lost everything," she managed to say between sobs. "The house, our savings, our retirement, everything we worked for is gone because we trusted the wrong person." Harold's breakdown followed quickly as he admitted that Tyler had systematically destroyed their financial security through lies, manipulation, and outright fraud. "Your brother convinced us to make decisions that seemed reasonable at the time but were actually designed to benefit only him. We ignored your warnings because we wanted to believe his promises." Their confession continued with painful details about the extent of their crisis. The foreclosure was scheduled for the following month, with no realistic possibility of prevention through their own resources. Their debt obligations exceeded their income by thousands of dollars monthly, making bankruptcy their only legal option for addressing Tyler's fraudulent loans. "We know we have no right to ask for your help after the way we treated you," Patricia said, her voice thick with shame and regret. "We dismissed your achievements, ignored your warnings, and chose Tyler's lies over your honesty. But you are our only hope for avoiding complete financial ruin." Harold's proposal was even more humbling than I had expected. "We will sign the house deed over to you immediately, if you are willing to save it from foreclosure. We will work any jobs necessary to pay you back, even if it takes the rest of our lives. Patricia can be your housekeeper, and I can do maintenance work or anything else you need." Their desperation was genuine and complete, but what they could not have anticipated was that I had been preparing for this conversation for months. While they were struggling through their crisis in isolation, I had been quietly researching their situation and developing a comprehensive strategy for addressing their problems in ways that would serve both justice and mercy. I calmly walked to my desk and returned with a folder containing extensive documentation that I had been accumulating since first discovering evidence of Tyler's fraud. Their confused expressions as I opened the folder revealed that they had no idea of the depth of my knowledge about their situation or the extent of my preparation for this moment. I need to explain something that you do not yet understand, I said, my voice steady and controlled. I have been aware of your financial situation for far longer than you realize, and I have been taking steps to address it without your knowledge. The documents I spread across the coffee table told the story of months of careful investigation and strategic planning. Bank statements, loan records, foreclosure timelines, and legal correspondence painted a complete picture of their crisis that exceeded even their own understanding of their situation. 6 months ago, I discovered the full extent of Tyler's fraud and the trajectory of your financial collapse, I explained. I also realized that pride would prevent you from asking for help until it was almost too late to provide effective assistance. Harold's eyes widened as he recognized some of the documents as papers that should have been private and inaccessible to me. How did you obtain copies of our mortgage statements and bank records? I have been meeting regularly with your bank since I first learned about your situation, I replied. Not as your daughter asking for information, but as a potential investor interested in purchasing distressed debt at a discount. Patricia's confusion was evident in her expression as she struggled to understand the implications of my statement. What does that mean? You have been talking to our bank about investing. I retrieved additional documents that revealed the true scope of my intervention. Your mortgage debt was sold by the original lender to a debt collection company 3 months ago. That company was willing to negotiate the sale of your obligation at a significant discount rather than proceed with expensive foreclosure proceedings. The purchase agreement that I placed before them showed the transaction that had made me their actual creditor for the past 2 months. I am now the legal holder of your mortgage debt. The foreclosure notices you have been receiving were generated by the law firm that I hired to handle the transaction. Their stunned silence revealed that they were struggling to process the complete reversal of power dynamics that my revelation had created. The daughter they had dismissed as jealous and negative had been secretly orchestrating their salvation, while they remained completely unaware of her involvement. Harold was the first to find his voice. You bought our mortgage? But that means you have been in control of our situation this entire time. Correct, I replied. I have been managing the foreclosure timeline and legal proceedings to give you enough time to accept reality about Tyler while preventing the actual loss of your home. Patricia's tears took on a different quality as she realized that her desperation had been unnecessary for months. You could have told us sooner. We have been suffering and afraid when you had already solved the problem. You needed to understand the full consequences of your choices, I explained. If I had rescued you immediately, you would have learned nothing about the difference between Tyler's lies and my reliability. This experience has forced you to confront truths that you would have otherwise continued to deny. The evidence I presented of Tyler's crimes was comprehensive and devastating. Forged signatures, identity theft, fraudulent loan applications, and elaborate schemes that had systematically destroyed their financial security over several years. My documentation was thorough enough to support criminal charges if they chose to pursue legal action against Tyler. Tyler has been stealing from you in increasingly sophisticated ways, I said, showing them copies of loan applications bearing their forged signatures. He developed the skills necessary to impersonate you on financial documents and used your personal information to fund his lifestyle while you believed you were supporting his business success. Harold's examination of the forged documents revealed Tyler's progression from amateur fraud to skilled deception. I never would have detected these signature forgeries. They look completely authentic to me. Tyler had years to practice and perfect his techniques, I replied. He also had complete access to your personal information and financial records through family relationships. His crimes were sophisticated and deliberate, not impulsive mistakes. The mortgage modification that I offered was generous but included requirements that would prevent future problems. Monthly payments were reduced to affordable levels based on their actual income. Interest rates were set below market standards. But the new agreement also included mandatory financial counseling and complete transparency about future financial decisions. You will attend financial literacy classes and family counseling sessions, I explained. You will provide me with monthly budget reports and seek approval before making any significant financial commitments. These requirements are not punitive, but protective. Patricia's grateful acceptance of my terms was immediate and heartfelt. We agree to everything you have proposed. We know now that our judgment cannot be trusted, and we need guidance to avoid repeating our mistakes. Harold's agreement came with obvious shame about requiring oversight from the daughter he had previously dismissed. You have saved us from disaster that we created through our own poor decisions, We will follow whatever guidelines you establish. The transformation in their attitudes was complete and genuine. The parents who had rejected my small loan request while approving Tyler's luxury car purchase were now acknowledging that I had demonstrated superior wisdom and financial judgment throughout the entire crisis. As they signed the new mortgage documents that would save their home, Harold looked directly at me with tears in his eyes. I am ashamed of how we treated you and how wrong we were about everything. You have proven yourself to be the child we should have trusted from the beginning. Patricia's words were even more meaningful. Tyler convinced us that love meant supporting his dreams regardless of reality. You have shown us that real love sometimes requires allowing people to face consequences while preparing to help them recover. We understand now which approach actually protects the people we care about. 6 months later, the transformation in our family dynamics was profound and lasting. Harold and Patricia had not only completed their required financial literacy courses and family counseling sessions, but had embraced the process with genuine enthusiasm for learning and change. Harold's new position at the local hardware store represented a significant reduction in salary compared to his previous management job, but he approached the work with dignity and gratitude that impressed his employer and coworkers. His knowledge of tools and building supplies, combined with his customer service skills, made him a valuable employee despite his age and circumstances. Patricia's part-time position at the city library had become a source of genuine pride and personal fulfillment. Her organizational skills and love of literature made her naturally suited for helping patrons find resources and navigate library services. The modest income she earned contributed to their household finances while giving her independence and professional identity that she had not experienced in years. Their financial habits had undergone a complete transformation. The budget system we had implemented together was followed religiously, with every expenditure planned and justified in advance. They had developed an appreciation for living within their means that replaced their previous pattern of wishful thinking and impulsive decisions. More importantly, their treatment of me had changed from dismissive tolerance to genuine respect and recognition. Family dinners now focused on my career achievements, relationship milestones, and future plans rather than Tyler's empty promises and fictional success stories. Harold actively shared my professional accomplishments with neighbors and acquaintances, expressing pride in my engineering career that he had never shown before. Their crisis forced them to recognize my capabilities. His boasting about my problem-solving skills and financial wisdom was sometimes embarrassing in its enthusiasm, but it represented a complete reversal of his previous indifference to my achievements. Patricia's letters to me had become a regular source of heartfelt appreciation and acknowledgement of years of unfair treatment. Her written apologies were specific and thoughtful, addressing particular incidents where she had dismissed my concerns or supported Tyler's manipulation of family dynamics. The engagement that Marcus and I announced during a family dinner was greeted with enthusiasm and offers of support that felt genuine rather than obligatory. Our parents volunteered to help with wedding planning within their budget constraints and expressed sincere excitement about our future together. Harold's preparation for walking me down the aisle had become a project that consumed his evenings and weekends. He was practicing the father-daughter dance that he had never expected to share with me, writing a speech that would acknowledge his mistakes while celebrating our reconciliation, and shopping for appropriate attire within his new financial limitations. Patricia's excitement about the possibility of becoming a grandmother someday reflected her recognition that Marcus and I represented the stable, loving relationship that Tyler's engagement to Amber had pretended to be. Her questions about our timeline and family plans came from genuine interest rather than social obligation. Tyler's fate had unfolded with the predictable consequences of his choices and character. His arrest for identity theft and fraud charges came after multiple victims had filed complaints with law enforcement agencies in several states. The evidence I had compiled proved valuable to prosecutors building cases against Tyler's various schemes. His conviction and 3-year prison sentence provided closure for our parents while confirming the wisdom of cutting all contact with him. Harold and Patricia's cooperation with law enforcement had been difficult but necessary, representing their commitment to accountability rather than continued enabling. The prison letters that Tyler sent were filled with self-pity and blame directed at everyone except himself. His complete lack of remorse or genuine apology confirmed that our parents had made the right decision to refuse his attempts at manipulation from behind bars. Their strength in maintaining no-contact boundaries impressed the family counselor and demonstrated their genuine growth. My professional life had continued to flourish with a promotion to department head that brought increased responsibilities and recognition within the engineering community. The leadership skills I had developed while managing my family's crisis proved valuable in supervising project teams and client relationships. The college scholarship fund that I established in memory of students who overcome family obstacles to achieve educational success had become a meaningful way to channel my experience into helping others. The first recipients were academically excellent students whose families had failed to support their educational goals, making their achievements even more remarkable. Harold and Patricia's volunteer work with financial counseling programs for families in crisis had become their way of preventing other people from making the mistakes that had nearly destroyed their lives. Their testimony about enabling behavior and the dangers of financial favoritism was powerful because it came from personal experience rather than theoretical knowledge. Their monthly mortgage payments had been made faithfully since our new agreement took effect, and their budget reports showed steady improvement in financial discipline and planning. The oversight that had initially embarrassed them had become a source of security, providing structure that supported their commitment to responsible money management. Family holiday celebrations had been transformed from showcases for Tyler's false success into genuine gatherings focused on gratitude, connection, and realistic planning for the future. The simplicity of our celebrations was more satisfying than the extravagance that had previously hidden family dysfunction and financial irresponsibility. Marcus had been welcomed into our family with warmth that reflected our parents' recognition that stable relationships were built on honesty and mutual respect, rather than flashy gestures and expensive displays. His steady personality and genuine care for me represented everything that Tyler's relationships had lacked. As I reflected on the journey from that painful dining room conversation about student loans to our current family harmony, I realized that justice and forgiveness were not contradictory but complementary forces that required patience, boundaries, and commitment to growth. The lesson that emerged from our family's crisis was not about money or sibling rivalry, but about the difference between enabling and supporting, between love and favoritism, and between flashy promises and reliable character. Real success was measured not by luxury possessions or social media presentations, but by integrity, responsibility, and the capacity to repair relationships damaged by poor choices. My parents had learned that equality does not mean treating different children identically, but rather recognizing and supporting the unique strengths that each person brings to the family. Their mistake had been confusing Tyler's manipulation with ambition while dismissing my steady progress as ordinary. The forgiveness that allowed our family to heal was possible only because Harold and Patricia had demonstrated genuine remorse through changed behavior rather than empty apologies. Their commitment to growth, accountability, and treating me with the respect I had always deserved made reconciliation meaningful, rather than superficial. Tyler's absence from our lives was not a loss, but a liberation that allowed genuine family relationships to develop without manipulation and deception. Our parents' decision to prioritize honesty and responsibility over maintaining denial about Tyler's character was the foundation for everything that followed. As Marcus and I planned our wedding with our parents' blessing and support, I felt grateful not only for the love we shared but for the family that had learned to recognize and value that love appropriately. The house that I had saved from foreclosure had become a home where all family members were treated with equal respect and consideration. The future that stretched ahead of us was built on the solid foundation of lessons learned through crisis, growth achieved through difficulty, and relationships repaired through genuine commitment to change. My parents' transformation from blind favoritism to wise equality had created space for Marcus and me to build our own family with their support and blessing. Before I conclude this story, I want to ask you something. Have you ever experienced favoritism in your family, whether as the favored child or the overlooked one? How did it affect your relationships with your parents and siblings? I believe that sharing our stories helps us realize that family challenges are more common than we think, and that healing is possible when people are willing to acknowledge their mistakes and commit to change. If this story resonated with you, please like this video to let me know that family stories like mine are worth sharing. Subscribe to hear more stories about overcoming family challenges and building stronger relationships through honesty and mutual respect. And please share this with someone who might benefit from understanding how patience, boundaries, and strategic thinking can lead to justice and healing in difficult family situations. Your comments and engagement help me create content that truly connects with people who have faced similar challenges. Thank you for listening to my story and for being part of a community that believes in the power of family transformation. I wish you strength, wisdom, and the kind of love that supports your best self rather than enabling your worst impulses.